cool, we're here. I'm so excited to be doing a live Instagram with you, Nemo. He's my great friend, and we're in London, aren't we? Unbelievably. And if you don't know Nemonte Nenquimo, she is the most incredible woman who has been at the forefront, co-founding Amazon Frontlines and the Sabo Alliance, and is a leader in the Indigenous movement across the world. And I am so honoured that we are in here in person. I followed her work for such a long time, and have been so humbled by the message that she has been spreading far and wide. And you've been in New York, haven't you, just now, with as part of the Climate Week for the UN, talking to leaders and asking them to listen to messages that we so urgently need to hear. But also here with Alex, who's translating for us in this conversation, which I'm also so grateful for. And Nemo is also the most, as the leader of this movement, has done amazing things. So I know that she did fought a huge battle against big oil and protected 500,000 acres of the Amazon rainforest a few years ago. She also got the Goldman Environmental Prize, which is a huge honour, and was one of the first Amazonian Indigenous woman to be part of Time's 100 most influential people. So as a woman, as a leader of this movement, I remember when I first heard your story, Nemo, I was so inspired. And I remember reading this one of the facts in one of your first emails that I got, which was, I couldn't believe this, which was 5% of the world's population is Indigenous, and yet they protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. And I couldn't believe the discrepancy between those two figures. And it seemed so unbelievable to me that we weren't listening to the 5% of the population that knows nature and that is actually in touch with nature day to day, and nature is the thing that we're ruining. So I have felt honoured to listen to your messages ever since, and I'm so glad you guys are joining us to hear her as well, because I said all that stuff, but I know that you wanted to say hello with a greeting that you use in the Amazon to say hello and to welcome people, which is a song. So I'd love you to do that, and I will stop talking.
Merina ni ke kai mai me, 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 merina ni ke kai mai me. Esta música es como nuestros ancestros luchaban y protegían y dejaban selva, y seguimos esa selva teniendo, y ese mismo camino estamos luchando.
Hello everybody. So this song is about how for thousands of years our ancestors defended the Amazon rainforest, defended our territory, and how today we are following in their footsteps. We are fighting the same fight to protect our lands, and we are drawing strength from our ancestors.
And so, Nemo, I'd love you to share with us your story, the one that I heard years ago when I first got in touch with you, because you said it so beautifully, much better than I could.
Nemo, para comenzar, si podrías contar un poco de tu historia, la historia que a mí me inspiró y me impactó tanto, un poco de quién eres y tu historia.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Nemonte Nenquimo, soy mujer guaurani de comunidad del Ecuador, en la Amazonía. Hace muchos años nuestros ancestros, nuestros abuelos vivían muy adentro en la selva por miles de años, y vivían armonía, paz, y recolectaban y comían, bebían. Y actualmente seguimos viviendo, porque la selva es todo, porque nos da casa para nosotros, para vivir en armonía. Y así que estamos nosotros ahora actualmente, las mujeres especialmente, estamos luchando porque nuestros abuelos dejaron selva para que nosotros seguimos protegiendo para nuestros hijos, para vuestros hijos, y también actualmente sentimos una amenaza grande ante nuestra casa de la selva, porque sabemos que el gobierno no está respetando. Nosotros sí tenemos respeto a nuestra selva y queremos seguir viviendo la manera libre y armonía.
So I'm a Waorani woman, leader of my people, and I come from the Ecuadorian Amazon. As I mentioned in my song, for thousands of years my people have lived in the Amazon rainforest in our ancestral territory, and in harmony with that forest and with our environment. And for us, the forest is our everything. It gives us everything we need. It is our home. And so we, especially we as Indigenous peoples, and especially Indigenous women, are fighting to protect our lands. We're fighting to protect our home. And we're doing this for future generations, for our children, so that they can live in a healthy forest, but also for children and future generations around the world, because we know that our planet depends on our home. And we're up against big threats. The government, for example, doesn't respect our rights as Indigenous peoples, our right to exist, and doesn't respect Mother Nature.
Y queremos seguir nosotros protegiendo y respetando esto. Tenemos nosotros como pueblos indígenas, claro, línea, pero muchas veces vemos que ante el gobierno no ven ese respeto, no miran para la vida y no sienten, como piensan que este espacio es un baldío espacio que no sirve, pero para nosotros es suma importancia, es muy valioso para el futuro y eso es que como mujeres sentimos como un dolor, como la madre tierra, la madre necesita respeto y nosotros como mujer también necesitamos respeto, que estamos el primer fila luchando y en eso nosotros estamos visibilizando para que puedan conocer cómo es causa de nosotros, de lucha de lo que vivimos realmente en la Amazonía.
And yeah, we as Indigenous peoples, we're protecting our lands in the face of these threats, in the face of governments and companies and an entire system that doesn't value our culture and our way of life, and doesn't value our territory and Mother Nature, that views our territory as an empty space, a land that's just full of resources to extract. And this is not how we see our territory. For us, our territory is a place full of life. And we as women in particular, we feel Mother Earth's pain. When the earth is harmed, when our territory is harmed, we feel that pain very deeply. And that's why we are fighting, and we are on the front lines. And we are really in the Amazon rainforest fighting to protect this land against deforestation and against these threats. And this is really what our struggle is about. It's about our survival, and it's about the survival of the entire planet. Yeah, so thank you for that question.
Can you talk about the fight against the big oil company? Because that was when it was a landmark case that you won, and you ended up protecting the rainforest, and I think it kind of embodied, well, 500,000 acres is huge, and it was a first, and I think it embodies the power that you have as Indigenous communities of the rainforest to protect first and foremost, in almost, as you say, frontlines. I always remember you saying like the last stand in a way against those huge corporations who, as you said, view it as empty land to be taken from. And can you tell us about that fight? Because I remember it was such an amazing achievement, and simply because you were speaking out and actually fighting. And I know that you require us to join you in that now, because you need more voices, which is why it's so amazing to be here together talking about it. So yeah, I wondered if you could talk about that and how you did it, and what it was like, and why it was so instrumental, and what we can learn from you fighting that and winning that case.
Hemos sabido, ¿no?, de tu lucha contra la industria petrolera, el Estado ecuatoriano, y esa lucha que resultó en la protección de su territorio, ¿no?, de 500,000 acres de selva, y que esa lucha también da ejemplo al mundo del papel tan importante que juegan los pueblos indígenas en la defensa de los ecosistemas más importantes. Y que ustedes, como dices, están como en la primera línea, ¿no? Y que esa gran victoria también para nosotros nos da mucho por qué aprender de ustedes. Entonces, quisiera que nos puedas contar un poco cómo fue el proceso de esa lucha y esa victoria, cómo lo hicieron, y qué podemos aprender, ¿no?, de esa experiencia.
Bueno, esta experiencia, yo puedo contar que esa experiencia, la comunidad, estuvimos muy seguros que nuestra selva es nuestra casa, nos da vida total. No podemos nosotros sin selva, no podemos vivir, no podemos existir. La única manera es la diversidad como mercado, farmacia, todo da. Y esa lucha era que yo crecí ahí y he visto otros pueblos en los primeros contactos con los petroleros, porque petroleros entra en las comunidades, dice que es desarrollo para la salud y para la educación. Pero realmente yo veo que no es así. El petróleo trae la enfermedad y muchas de las veces empresa explica que el petróleo va como néctar, como un picaflor a un líquido y no afecta al medio ambiente, ni siquiera explican. Pero yo me fui a ver a otras comunidades en norte donde viven con petróleo presencia. No era verdad lo que dice, ni había salud, ni había educación, el agua está contaminado, la deforestación al área está cortado y no tienen pescado y no tienen carne como para comer, ya no tienen como nosotros tierra para cultivar.
So I'll start by saying that one of the reasons that our fight was so successful was because it was rooted in our values as Indigenous people, and our shared understanding that what was at stake was our home. For us, the forest is our market, it's our pharmacy, it gives us everything that we need. And I was very fortunate to understand that because I grew up in a place without oil extraction. Mm-hmm. My territory was free of oil extraction, and it's a healthy and vibrant territory. But in my work, I have met I've visited other Indigenous communities, met Indigenous peoples who have been impacted by oil for decades. And I've seen how what the government talks about as so-called development, for us as Indigenous peoples, is nothing other than sickness, death, mm-hmm. the loss of our cultures, mm-hmm. The polluting of our rivers. I've seen communities that no longer can even get fish from the rivers or hunt animals in the forest because of the impacts of these industries and deforestation. So to me, this conversation about development is a big lie. It's not for us what development is. And so that was a really fundamental component of our struggle.
Y yo veo que el petróleo no soluciona en la selva. El petróleo no solamente impactos ambientales lleva al daño al territorio, sino también culturales, sociales, porque los pueblos indígenas vivimos en colectividad, compartiendo armonía, alegría. Una vez que ya entra carretera, una vez que ya entra petrolera, ahí los hombres empiezan a trabajar en petrolera, ya empiezan con ese dinero a tomar alcohol, ya empiezan a desconectar con la naturaleza, desconectar como ir a pescar, y ya el bosque ya extingue, ya no hay naturaleza como para ir a ver medicina o comida, es como total. Eso yo he visto y por eso mismo yo encabecé como mujer, me preocupé también viendo a mis propias nacionalidades que viven con la presencia, ya no viven en armonía, ya no viven bien feliz con las familias. Es como todo choque cultural y afecto en ambiente. Por eso era importante decidir, no vamos a permitir en nuestro territorio, vamos a permitir que esta selva quede y que vivimos bien como pueblos indígenas y a la vez nosotros detenemos a cambio climático. Por eso la gente de ciudad, sociedad de aquí no entienden la vida de selva. O sea, para generar la economía de personas, ciudades grandes, tienen que arrozar río, tienen que destruir todo para traer la economía y a la vez dejan causando daño, impacto nuestro cultural y la muerte. Y también, ¿de qué estamos hablando? Cambio climático está levantando calentamiento, aumento de río, viento. Pero yo creo que eso tenemos que sentar. Ya hemos ganado como mujeres indígenas. Necesitamos como que la gente de ciudad entienda. Yo entiendo que es muy difícil la gente de ciudad de entender porque ya no viven cerca de la naturaleza, ya no viven cerca conectados con espiritualmente, es otro tiempo. Por eso es muy importante, hay que permitir el espacio a los pueblos indígenas, a los líderes indígenas, sentar, dialogar el impacto, daño que afecta al medio ambiente y el cultural y qué queremos hacer la vida para nuestras futuras generaciones.
So for us, as I was saying, oil extraction, resource extraction isn't the solution, and it doesn't bring positive development to our communities. And the impacts of oil extraction doesn't just affect the land, it doesn't just affect the forest, it affects our culture and our way of life. We as indigenous peoples, traditionally, we live collectively. We live in harmony with our environment, and we live a life that's full of joy and full of laughter. And what oil brings into our territories is a complete disconnect from our traditions, from that collectivity, from our connection to nature. It brings problems like alcoholism, and disconnects us from our own medicine, our own way of healing. And so I was very concerned as a woman leader about the potential impacts of oil in our territory. And so we organized and we made the collective decision, we do not want any extraction in our lands. And our decision was firm. This is our home, and it's not for sale. What we want, and what our fight is really all about, is living well. It's thriving in our territories. It's protecting our land, and ultimately it's about stopping climate change, because our territory is so critical to stopping changing climate chaos, global warming. And I think that the outside world doesn't really understand, at least most people, where the resources that fuel industrial societies actually come from, and what the impact of getting those resources to the industrial societies has on people like my people and indigenous peoples in the Amazon rainforest. And the threat that we face, what we're up against, is really big. I mean, we're talking about a warming planet, rising sea levels, pandemics, and people really need to understand the role that they're playing and that their lifestyle is playing in creating this situation. And so that was a big part of our struggle too, was raising awareness globally to the importance of our territory, not only for ourselves, but for the entire planet. And I think that that's something that needs to continue. Decision makers, activists, people around the world, when we're talking about climate change and when we're coming up with solutions, we need to involve indigenous leaders in those discussions. We need to involve our worldview in those discussions. ¿Algo más?
Un poco concluir ahí, la lucha de los pueblos, estamos ahí en primera línea. Para nosotros hemos visto que estamos defendiendo para la vida de los pueblos y para el global del planeta. El gobierno ve una amenaza y ese es un dolor para estar al frente de una mujer como activista, líder, defiende para la vida en futuras generaciones, como el gobierno interpone que es riesgo, que no permite a desarrollar, y eso como siento como que el mundo están ojos cerrados, no están pensando como mujeres, como madre, que queremos que el futuro, nuestra niñez, que disfruten. No entiendo que ven presente nada más, y qué va a pasar en el futuro. Esa es como preocupación general de los pueblos indígenas, que somos realmente entregando nuestra vida en primera línea de lucha.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we're on the front lines, we're defending our lands, we're fighting against climate change. But what's really sad is that the government in Amazonian countries and in Ecuador in particular views us, indigenous peoples, as a threat, and views us as an obstacle. And it's really hard. It's hard to be under so much pressure all the time, particularly as an indigenous woman leader. It's something that is painful, and it hurts. And I think that one of my big messages for the world is that people need to start thinking like mothers.
Yeah.
Thinking about future generations, thinking about the long term, the big picture, not just focusing on the present, you know, the quality of your quality of life in this present moment, but how are your children going to be able to live? This is really our concern as Indigenous peoples, is how we can help spread that to the rest of the world, to think as mothers. Thanks for that question.
No, I loved that, and I was going to ask you about. Well, I wanted you to share about how it felt to fight on the front lines, knowing what you know and feeling often like you're spreading the message, but people aren't listening to you. When you know something that people need to hear, and you are the closest to the solution, and you are fighting it, it must feel so frustrating. And I'm really grateful that you shared that. And I think it's a message that every single human on the planet needs to hear, and we're not listening. And I just wondered, as an individual, how, because we talk about solutions, and sometimes we think the corporations who have done nothing, and the leaders who seemingly have done nothing, and I know you met with them and are trying to reach them, but as individuals, either us listening here or me or anyone, how can we, as individuals, you talked about mindset shift, are there practical things that we can do to help you, and not just transmit your message, but practical things in our daily lives to join you somehow in the daily life, because you must feel so alone with it. So I wanted to ask you about that, to talk about the individual thing, and then I wanted to ask about what you think. Well, should we come to that second? We'll answer this one first, and I'll ask the next one.
Sí, Nemonte, muchas gracias por todo lo que has compartido, y sí, como no puedo imaginar lo difícil que puede sentir estar en la línea del frente, ¿no? Y estar entregando realmente su vida y sentir que la gente a veces no está escuchando, ¿no?, el mensaje. Pero realmente el mensaje que das es un mensaje que todos tenemos que escuchar. Y siento a veces que no estamos escuchando. Pero en línea de eso, una pregunta que tengo es, como para la gente que está escuchando hoy, ¿qué es algo que podemos hacer, como concretamente, para apoyarte y apoyar a la lucha?
Yo diría que la gente que están escuchando es el respeto de toma de nuestras decisiones, lo que pasa en nuestro territorio, y eso significaría que el gobierno debe respetar nuestro derecho, y cualquier cosa que el gobierno quiere como conversar, no queremos que hable con líder, a una persona representante, sino con el sentimiento, con la comunidad, con la base. Y también sería que no esperen la gente de sociedad que solo estemos luchando las mujeres indígenas en primer fila. Realmente estamos como nosotros, de la lucha de nosotros es de planeta, de mis hijos, para los hijos que están viviendo en todas partes, es como apoyar, no solo esperar que sean líderes mujeres, sino ser activistas, algunos canales en el mundo, y yo tengo mucha esperanza con las mujeres, trabajar, tejer con ellos, si podemos. La unión podemos lograr, sin unión no podemos lograr, porque ese es el camino. Yo veo que sé que el gobierno político no van a tener respeto hacia la naturaleza ni a los pueblos indígenas, pero yo sí tengo realmente esperanza, es gente, sociedades como tu persona que quiere entender la vida, como que tienes tu corazón muy abiertamente, queriendo entender la cultura y el respeto. Eso sería como unir, apoyar y ser como alianza, digamos, ese equipo de lucha, una sola causa, y también visibilizar el lucha de los pueblos indígenas, que todos estamos en primera línea como mujeres indígenas, especialmente para que no estemos solas, ¿no? Y estemos solo fuerte, y también con unión sería como detenemos para la vida de todos seres humanos que estamos en ese planeta. Y también decirle que también es la responsabilidad de todos los países. El corte derecho humano dice que hay leyes que nosotros podemos construir, y eso deben empujar los líderes de cada país, para que no pueden seguir extrayendo y destruyendo. Eso le puede quedar con respeto. Sin eso, yo creo que no vamos a estar hablando de futuras generaciones. Lo que van a consecuencias sufrir son nuestros futuros hijos. Y eso es como apoyar entre todo el mundo, no esperar que sean pueblos indígenas.
Thank you for that question. I think that the answer really starts with respect, and inviting people to learn about our struggles, and to respect Indigenous peoples, and to respect our decisions and our right to decide. We do have a right that's called the right to free, prior, and informed consent, and that is something that guarantees our right to decide what happens on our lands. And this is something we're demanding that governments and companies respect. And so it's important to help us raise awareness by talking about this, and understanding this concept. The other thing I would say to people listening is, don't expect us as Indigenous peoples to do this on our own. We can't do this work for you. This is something we all have to do together. It's not just about Indigenous peoples on the front lines risking our lives to protect these ecosystems that the whole world depends on, but we need support, and we need people to join together with us. So I invite you all to join us, to learn about our struggle, to share about it, and to support it in any way that you can. Get active, get involved, become an activist, get active in your own community, and share our stories. And particularly I invite women to join together, because women's strength and leadership and vision is such a fundamental part of solutions. And if we're united, we're stronger. If we're not united, we'll never be successful. And I have a message for everyone, which is just really that this is up to us. It's up to all of us together. And it's so wonderful to talk with people like you, Vanessa, who have a really open heart and really want to understand about us as Indigenous peoples and what our struggle is really about. So I invite others out there to take that same position. Because we as Indigenous peoples, we feel very alone in this fight, and so it's helpful for us to know that we're not alone, because there are people out there that are supporting us. And one final thing I'll say is just, in any way that you can, push your leaders, push your decision makers to make decisions that are sustainable, that put Earth first, that don't look at short-term profit and extraction, but that actually value the planet, respect Indigenous rights, and respect future generations.
Thank you so much, Nemonte. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Muchas gracias, Nemonte. ¿Algo más que quisieras decir?
También decirle, en el encuentro de cambio climático tienen que ser más partícipes las mujeres lideresas que realmente están luchando desde la comunidad, que participen y que dan la idea de transición, porque muchas de las veces yo veo no hay ese espacio, hay solamente académicos participan y no entienden la realidad. Sería mucho mejor es que tienen que esforzar a la gente académica que organiza el cambio climático, traer o sentar con las mujeres líderes para que den idea y cómo pueden solucionar este cambio climático también, ese espacio.
Yeah, just one final message really is that I really want to see more Indigenous, particularly Indigenous women, leaders, and perspectives brought to the table. Yeah. Being in New York during Climate Week and being able to travel and see these spaces, I just feel like we're being left out of the discussion and the debate. And I want to see more leaders from frontline communities represented and being able to have a voice at the table and in discussions when we talk about solutions. So often these discussions are happening between people that don't understand the reality on the front lines and don't understand what it really takes to fight against climate change. And so we need to have more Indigenous voices and more representation.
And I suppose that's why it's so important that no matter how how far away you live geographically from the Amazon or from you, Nemo, and I live in London and I've often felt so helpless with it, and yet learning from you and hearing that and going, why should you not have as much of a platform, if not more than anyone, given the fact that you live in an environment. I remember you telling me that nearly 90% of Indigenous land is protected from deforestation, and the rest of deforestation happens outside of that area. So it just proves that Indigenous communities are literally protecting the land that is the Mother Nature is protecting us from the thing that we are heading towards, and we all have a part in that. And it seems so wild to me that we're all sharing the planet, and just hearing you talk about the fact that you don't feel like you have a voice. And so I suppose what we can help is add to your voice and listen and be behind talking about it, spreading your message, pressuring people to listen to you who know best. And so that means, for me, it was, first learning about you, watching her amazing TED talk that she did recently, which is so cool, right from the rainforest, and joining Amazon Frontlines. I remember joining you guys years ago and going, oh my God, they're doing such amazing work, and then getting in touch with you and saying, how can I listen more and try and really understand what you're saying, as someone that lives in the modern world in a metropolis of a city that is not paying attention. So if anyone I would love you guys to go onto the Instagram page, go on the website, donate if you can, and follow your amazing work, because she is doing it on the front lines, and I'm just so honoured and humbled to be sat here with this incredible woman who is leading it. And I hope I continue to learn from you, and it's so cool that we've done it. I've never done one of these before, ever. So it's so cool to do it with you, and I'm so grateful to see you, and thank you for joining us. And I don't know, someone needs to know how to end it, but it's been a privilege. Anything else, Alex?
Not from my end. Thank you everyone for joining us. Check out the link in our bio. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for your time.
No, it's a privilege.
Muchas gracias,
No
Nemonte.
sería eso última. Tienes que venir, Selva, a conocer.
Says now we have to bring you to the Amazon.
Oh my God, I know. Well, I've been trying, but it was COVID, wasn't it? I couldn't get down there, but I can't wait. I'm going to be this, totally blown away. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Ciao.